All right, in this demo, I'm going to talk about selections. Specifically, I'm going to kind of be going over your Photoshop CC 2017 Classroom in a Book, Lesson 3, Chapter 4 Selections. So, the first thing that we're going to discuss is how to use the quick selection tool, and but I'm going to also talk to you about different kinds of selection tools. And as a really quick understanding of where we're going to end up after all of the different video tutorials, this is the place that we're going to basically end up. So this is looking at the end.psd file that you should have access to for the book, and this is what it looks like in the very end. Right, this is what we're going to start off with. So if you're following along in the book, I think it tells you to, use Bridge to look at your stuff. And one of the things that Bridge is nice because you can get, really good a good idea of what things look like with thumbnails and so on. But one of the problems that a lot of you might have with Bridge, and I didn't really talk about this in the last chapter's tutorials, but is that Bridge takes up a lot of resources on your computer. So if you have a computer where you're doing well just to be able to run Photoshop by itself without a whole bunch of other stuff running, then I'm going to recommend that you not use Bridge and not have Bridge open constantly, because it'll slow your computer down. So anyway, I'm going to forego the whole Bridge part for those of you who aren't going to be using it. So anyway, you're going to start off with this file, and then in the end, when we're done, it's going to basically look like this. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one that's called end.psd. I'll close that. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this file before I do anything else. So I'll go up to here to File, and I'll do Save As. And then I'm going to save it in my Lesson 3 folder that I'm working in, and I'll call this Working. Okay, so that we know that that is not going to override the original start PSD. All right, so now you see that the tab says working.psd. All right, so first thing I want to talk to you about is the difference in the variety of selection tools that we have access to. Okay, first of all, this right here is the Marquee tool, and if you click and hold it, see it's got a little triangle down here. If you click and hold, you'll see that it also has the elliptical Marquee tool. So the one that's probably going to be the default is the rectangular Marquee tool on your computer. And then there's the elliptical Marquee tool. And then there's a single row of pixels that's horizontal and a single column that is vertical. And when I say single, I just mean literally it'll select one pixel, because sometimes that's very, very hard to do. So it's kind of a nice thing to be able to just select one pixel all the way up or all the way across your what do you call it, composition. So anyway, I'm going to leave it on the Marquee, the regular rectangle one for right now. Then this next set right here, these are the lasso tools. So you have this sort of normal lasso. That's probably the first one that you'll see. I don't use that one as often as I use the polygon lasso tool. And then there's also the magnetic lasso. We'll kind of go over that when it's time. But these are freeform or freehand selection tools, whereas this one, for instance, you can literally draw a box and it sort of will make a selection. And right, so you can see that I can click and drag, make a selection, right? That's the Marquee tool. This one is the regular lasso tool. I can just sort of make a freehand selection. You can see that it's very easy to make, but it's crude. So sometimes it's kind of nice if you are trying to get a very specific area, like let's say this, but you don't care that you have some of the remaining pixels around it. You can just click, and then you see that little circle at the end, and you can end up making a full selection. So that one, for instance, is another freehand that I like because it has a little bit more control than the regular lasso tool. And then to deselect on any selection, you can do Command on a Mac, D as in deselect, or on Windows, Control D as in deselect. All right, so there, it's deselected. And then we'll go over the magnetic lasso tool and how it behaves later. This, by the way, the magnetic lasso tool is an edge finding tool. It's freehand to some degree. Your book will classify it both under freehand as well as under edge finding, but really it's intended to be an edge finding tool. So it finds the difference of between values on edges of things. Okay, so the next set of tools that we're going to discuss is under the quick selection tool. And below that is the magic wand tool. These are also edge finding tools. Quick selection tool is going to be one of your best friends for a lot of kinds of things because it's a pretty smart tool. And you'll notice as I clicked all these different ones that this options panel changed. So you'll see that different selection tools have different options up here with them. So we're going to start off with this quick selection tool. And you see these are my options up here. And the brush size does matter, and the hardness does matter. So it depends on how hard the edge is or how soft the edge is as to how it's going to make that selection. If I make a soft edge, if I turn the hardness down, it's going to be very feathered and fuzzy. You see how fuzzy and soft that is? So you're not going to get a good clean edge. If you want a good clean, super crisp, sharp edge, then you would turn the hardness all the way up. If you kind of want it somewhere in between, you might want to turn it down a little bit. Okay, and then the size with the quick selection tool also does make a difference in terms of how well it's going to select the edges properly. So it's based on how big or small the sample is. All right, so if I want to select this sand dollar with this quick selection tool chosen, then I'm going to look at my choices up here where I've got regular selection tool, and then where it says plus up here, if you notice this has a little plus symbol, and then this one next to it has a minus symbol. I'm going to have the plus symbol selected. This selection tool is kind of nice because if you want to add to a selection using this tool, you don't have to hold down the shift key to do it. It allows you with this little plus symbol to just always be able to add or always be able to subtract or whatever. If you choose the normal new selection, then it'll create a new selection. So I'm going to just leave my brush at the default. Right now it's at 30. I have the hardness kind of turned up. I could turn the hardness down just a little bit if I wanted a slightly softer edge, you know, like just so that it, you know, makes the edge a little bit softer. The other thing too is where it says auto enhance. Sometimes, depending on your selection, if you choose auto enhance, the selection is going to be a nicer selection typically. It takes better care of the edges, but you might have to spend a tiny bit more time with it. In this particular case, this sand dollar is so cut out looking already that it actually is going to be very simple. And so if I click on it, you see it actually found the edges right away. And if I blow this up a little bit, you can take your magnifying tool to do that, or you can use your either trackpad or your mouse controls to do it. And if I blow this up pretty big, then we can actually inspect how it's choosing the edges. And because I have like just a couple of pixels of softness, you notice that it actually allows some of these lighter colors of this maroon in the background, so that it's not going to look like it's so crisp and cut out. I could have made it even softer if I wanted. One of the things you need to pay attention to is to look where it's going to go. It's going to suggest that you put it right here. And if you have that very, very soft edge, then this is actually probably not bad, because you'll notice that, see, this is sort of a rust brown color, where this down here is like a rust color. And so I just want to let you know that a lot of times it's not going to be this simple, right? This is an extremely simple example. It's just so you can use the tools, learn how to use the tools. Hardly ever are your selections going to be this easy to make, all right? But I just wanted to point this out because this is on a rust background. It's already doing a blending. Actually, let me blow this up again. It's already doing like a blending here on the edge with this sort of pale beige color with a rust color, and it's doing this in-between blending of tones. And so one of the things about taking that selection is that because this background color is not very dissimilar, for instance, from this background color, it's going to probably blend in the majority of places a little bit better. Maybe it might have some issues in some of the places where there's white, but I think it'll be fine. So what I want to do is now I want to take my move tool. There's some different ways you could do this. You could take your move tool, and the other thing too is, let's take a look at our layers panel, and you see that everything right now is on one big layer. So if I unlock this, first of all, I could literally just move the sand dollar so that it is right here. Let me show you how that will behave. I'm going to take the move tool, and you see it shows scissors right now. So watch what happens. I can click it and I can move it up here and sort of drop it in the place that it seems to make sense. All right, so drop it somewhere in this range right there. And notice what it did. It literally cut it out. The other thing you'll notice is that right now that didn't create another layer, right? So right now, if I were to move this while it's still selected, I can, but the minute that I move this like this, right, and then I deselect with my Control or Command D, as in deselect, right? Now watch what happens if I try to move this. It moves the whole layer because I'm going to undo that with Control or Command Z as in zebra. Um, it it moves the whole layer of everything because what it did was when I moved that, it cut it out of this section, but it pasted it into this section, and it is no longer separate from that section. All right, so that's one thing I want you to notice. All right, so if I wanted to undo that, now here's the next thing I want to show you as well. If I were to go and take my quick selection tool again and select the sand dollar, you see now it has very similar pixels. The range of color is sort of in a similar range out here. So now the selection's a little bit harder to make, just so you know. All right, it's not quite as simple as it was earlier. So this might be where I'd want to lower, the size of my brush a little bit. I can also turn this into a minus, and I can, sort of click in some of these areas, and I could remove that. And I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go backwards in my history, but I want to just use this to kind of illustrate a point to you. All right, I'm making really not careful selections right now, okay, just so you know. But I want to show you what would happen if I took this sand dollar and I took that move tool. Whoops, sorry about that. And I took this move tool and I tried to move it again. Look what happens. Now it cuts these pixels out. So you can see that whenever I just move something in a selection without actually making a new layer, it starts to like really sort of destroy, in some ways destroy the image. So at this point, what I really want to do is I want to go back in my history and I want to undo some stuff, okay? Let's undo this move, and you can start to see that these are all those little quick selections that I did, trying to isolate that. Let's get this back to where it was. All right, so there. Now we're back to what we had before, and we have our selection made, and I'm going to collapse my history. And remember, this is the history icon where it looks like you can go backwards in steps. If you can't find that icon, then you can always go up here to Window, and you can find your history right there, okay? Now, the other thing, see now, if I just leave that there, it shows scissors. I want to show you something else that you can do. And the book at this point doesn't really talk about it, but I might as well go ahead and show you. If I hold down my Option key, look what happens. I get a different, here, let's blow this up just a little bit. Okay, now if I hold down my Option key, it goes from scissors, there's Option, and you see this double-headed arrow. One of them is black, one of them is white. What it means is that if I hold Option as I click now I'm clicking and I drag, it's going to duplicate that for me, all right, and it's going to drop it there. Okay, now notice over here in layers that it did not create a new layer, and as soon as I deselect, that's going to permanently become part of this. Okay, just so you understand that. The other thing I can do, I'm going to undo that. Okay, I still have my selection. Now this is the third way that you could handle this. You could go, and again, the book doesn't go over this right now, but I think it's important that you understand when we're first learning about selections. I think it's important that you understand all the different ways that you can manipulate your selections. So you can just literally cut and move, like the first thing we did, where the scissors were present on the move tool like this, or you can do Option, which is duplicate and move. All right, and the other option would be to copy this. So I could do a keyboard command of Control or Command C as in copy. I can also go up to Edit, Copy like that. And the other thing I can do now is I'm going to say Edit, and then I'm going to go where it says Paste Special, and I'm going to say Paste in Place. And what it'll do, and here's the shortcut for it, so it's Shift, and this is Command on a Mac or Control on Windows, V as in Victor, which is the paste. So, and then I'm going to paste in place, and what it does, look what it did. It actually made a new layer right here, but it doesn't look like it made a new layer because it pasted it exactly in the same place. But now if I take, while layer 1 is selected, if I take my move tool and then I move it up here, you see that now it is a new layer, and I can move this around independently no matter where it is, okay? Which is kind of far superior, in my opinion, than doing the thing where you cut or you duplicate and you're basically destroying all the pixels that are underneath here in case you needed to make some adjustments later. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do, I want to show you something really quickly. If I move this out of the way, one of the things you'll notice is this edge is sort of crisp, and if I wanted to look at it at 100%, so I know that I agree with, you know, my assessment that it's kind of crisp, you'll see that it's a little bit crisp. So another thing that you could do, if you can't get the exact edge with that quick selection tool, the softness of it that you want, let me show you another little trick. We'll call this sand dollar 1. Okay, and what I'm going to do down here is I'll make another quick selection tool selection. And what I want you to notice really quickly is how I've changed my options up here. So I've got the plus again, and then if you look, I changed my hardness and I dropped the hardness down. So you can really turn the hardness down to see, you know, how soft of an edge you can get and play around with that. So if I blow this up, let's blow this up a little bit so we can kind of see the type of edge that it's making. All right, and I can select that right there, and I've still got auto enhance turned on. And then you'll see that in here, you'll see that it really didn't treat the edges that differently. Although it might have included some extra pixels, I think that it's still a little bit, possibly a little bit crisp. Now, one of the things that I can do is I can go back and I can feather this. So I can go up to where it says select, and while I have my selection made, I can go to modify, and then I can say feather. Well, first of all, one of the things I could also do is I can say contract. So I'm going to make the selection like a little bit smaller, and let's make it smaller by 1 pixel, not by 2. Okay, and now it's a little bit cut into this, you know, inside, and so it's a little bit sharp right there. So what I can do now is I can go back up to select and say modify, and this time I want to say feather, and I want to feather it. Let's say feather by, we could try 2 pixels. Let's just see what happens. So, but I think we should feather it by 1 pixel. So let's just say okay, and then let's we'll zoom back out. Okay, and now what I want to do is I'm going to copy this with Command or Control C as in copy on my keyboard. So that's what I just did. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is take my, I'm not going to move it yet, but I'm going to do Command Paste, Command V as in Victor. Okay, and then you see that it made a new layer over here. And in this particular case, it doesn't always do this, but it did paste it exactly in the same place. It does not always do that though. I just want you to understand that. So we'll call this new layer, we'll call it sand dollar 2. Okay. And I'm going to take my move tool now, and while sand dollar 2 is selected, I'm going to move it up. And you can kind of see if you compare the edges that that's a little bit softer. And if we blow it up to 100%, it's a much softer edge, and you may or may not like that softer edge. Once it's on top of the background though, it actually, I think, maybe looks a little bit better. This edge looks a little bit cut out to me. So I think that this edge might actually be a little bit more successful. So those are the kinds of things that you can do if you want to explore a little bit beyond what the book suggests for you to do. You can kind of play with different edges and stuff. So I'm going to actually get rid of the first sand dollar. Let's throw that in the trash. That one in the corner now goes away. And then I can just rename this one as sand dollar. Okay. So, like I said, the book doesn't talk about layers just yet, but I think that those are really important options so that you see all of your different options. Okay, that's the end of this demo, and you can move on to the next one.